Anil, what was life like growing up in Afghanistan as a kid?
To me, in general, life in Afghanistan was very, very beautiful despite all the violence that sadly was happening across the country that we had to witness. Just growing up in Afghanistan, I remember every single day. Since I remember I was very, very young, at a very young age, that there was conflict of different kinds in my country. And I remember even then traveling back and forth to be on the just to be safe. But despite all the violence, the Afghanistan also had very, very beautiful things, and something I have witnessed because it wasn't happening close to me, the violence and war all the time. I think life to me, growing up in Afghanistan, was very beautiful, very rewarding. I have very good memories of life in Afghanistan. Uh, Despite everything, as I said, I have managed to get it, to, to live a very good life in Afghanistan, and I don't regret even a single minute of it. I mean, obviously, I got hurt in one of those um, very unfortunate event that happened in Afghanistan. One of those incidents, but despite that, I've lived a good life, and yeah, I still miss and I love. Hopefully, maybe if I get a chance to get back into there, but I know the reality of life, it's not going to happen.
Did you grow up in the city or the countryside? Whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in the city. I've always lived in the capital in Kabul,
Kabul.
and I've lived all my life in the capital. Actually, I've traveled across the country, but I've lived most of my life in Kabul.
Mm. Okay, so in terms of kind of growing up in Afghanistan, the last kind of 30, 40, maybe even 50 years, Afghanistan has gone through so many conflicts. The Soviet Union invasion, and of course, most recently, US, NATO spent, I think, 21 plus years. And then you've also had to deal with internal politics. That means the civilians have gone through a lot in the last 2 or 3 generations. What is the character of people from Afghanistan like? Are they really resilient because they've seen all of these conflicts? What's the character like of Afghani people?
I think in the past 50 years of Afghanistan, I mean, obviously I've witnessed the past 20 years or so because I've lived there. But anything before that is something I've written the history books in the school or just taking a book all the time, reading about the history of Afghanistan, which is very, very unfortunate because us, the civilian, never had any control over things happening in the country. We were very unlucky to have had foreign powers coming into the country all the time and destabilizing the situation, which has obviously impacted us. But I've heard stories of that time from my parents, from my mom, from my dad, and from the families. Very, very unfortunate. They have suffered exactly the same way as we have now. And I think the number of civilians who has had seen the impact of the war and violence, uh, whether that came from the invasion of foreign powers into Afghanistan or the internal political disagreement between groups that resulted in violence within the country countrywide. I think people, almost all Afghans, have been traumatized, and it's a trauma that I think not everyone will be able to talk because it became very, very normal thing, normal part of life. And speaking of resilience, yes, I think I strongly believe Afghans are resilient, and it just came purely because there were no other option, because they were stuck in that. If you were stuck in a position for too long, you get used to it. And I think the war that resulted in Afghanistan, it made people get used to that. So people are resilient because nobody gave up. Look at the suicide rate in Afghanistan in the past 50 years, 20 years, 10 years, even now. It's I don't think there is I don't think it's the same as anywhere else in the world. So that Afghans are resilient despite all the problems that's happening, everything that they face. They're resilient. They smile. They get along with their lives, and with all the betrayal and everything that's happening to the people of Afghanistan from different sources, they stand tall. So they are resilient.
That's a really interesting point because I was reading just the other day that for West America, Britain, we have a substantially higher suicide rate compared to what people consider developing countries. So the comparison I read was kind of the impoverished regions of Nigeria. Their suicidality rate is well below what it is here in the UK, in London. And what I'm quite interested in this because, as you mentioned, Afghanistan's gone through so much. Do you think it's built some type of bond where you have to depend on your neighbour, and there is almost a higher sense of purpose in these type of countries where conditions are harder to live in compared to a London, that contributes to lower suicidality? It's kind of a weird one to wrap your head around because a war-torn country that's gone through so much is, performing better than the so-called Western countries on this metric.
I think there are so many elements to look at this specific issue. It's, in my personal opinion, one of those elements that comes in Afghanistan from for the people of Afghanistan. In general, people are very religious. So part of our religion, suicide is completely forbidden. So that never actually comes in people's mind, even if they struggle. I mean, I don't say that it doesn't happen. It does happen, but that rate is extremely low. But that's just one element. But also, people are very social in Afghanistan. If you ever, and I hope you get a chance to visit Afghanistan, you will see the number of people, the face of the people, smiling and getting on with life. And they are social. The support system and networks exist within families, within communities, within cities. People are connected to each other, and if something goes wrong, there's always. I mean, it also exists in here, but the pace of life in London is completely different, or in general in West, as compared to in a place like Afghanistan. So I think if you see these elements, these are what contributing to the level of depression and suicide rates. And there's enough support in Afghanistan. I mean, I had PTSD for many, many years. I didn't know what PTSD was. And I met the doctor who told me it was PTSD, and there was no support in Afghanistan. I kept looking and looking. I never found a doctor to go and have a consultation with on that area. So I had to take a plane to travel to India to get some treatment. And then every couple of months go and see a psychologist until I found out what that was. So there's no support, but still, the rates are extremely low, and that's because people are social, and there's also that support network that exists among that crisis. People, the bond is very, very strong there.
Was there any hesitation about choosing the American university in Afghanistan, given what was happening at the time?
Definitely, because when I went to apply for the American university, I had a chat with my father, who disagreed, and my mom, my family in general, just because of the huge risks associated with the name American. And we have seen that in Afghanistan already, that kept happening at the time. And even going to the campus to have that level of security, the checks, the walls, and you would feel like you're going into a compound, like an embassy. That itself would give you a hesitation. Should I go and study here? But then it also, okay, it's safe. It's an educational center. It's not something that's just getting an education. It's like, So the hesitation did exist, but I chose to, because there was no other option. I think I chose to get a good education, so I went to the American University.
So you were pursuing higher education to better yourself. You just mentioned the risks of studying at a university associated with America whilst America was in Afghanistan. You were unfortunately a victim to an attack on the university by the Taliban. Could you talk about what happened on that day?
That was just the second semester, when the second semester had just started on probably day 2 or 3 of that semester when I was there, and a very normal day. Just all of us friends were walking down to around campus, and we went to the classroom, and then there was suddenly a huge explosion that we could feel that it shook the entire building. And I looked at my friends, and we all see that everything was broken, and it was a situation that I personally had only seen on the news or television that used to happen. Personally, never thought I would be into one of those, and I was stuck in that building for a couple of hours. I sustained life-threatening injuries. I am lucky I survived. I managed to get out. It took me a couple of hours to move from one building to another because almost half of my body, I had a few broken parts in my body. Um, but I managed. I think I was lucky. I managed to get from one building to another and to another, and eventually I was evacuated to a hospital a couple of hours later.
Wow, I did 4 years at university, and I can't imagine that. So, what was it? A grenade that entered the classroom full of students?
Yeah, initially it was a bomb explosion within a car, just for them to get into the building, and then within the classroom, because the doors were shut, so grenades. Yes, there were grenades in certain classrooms to just for them to get into the classroom, and by then I had already jumped from the building. So
Wow. Was the campus manned by US Western troops?
no, no, the campus it was not part of any military. It wasn't a military institution. It was a private. It was just like a private university. So the security on campus at the time were all just normal. Uh, I mean, we did not have a lot of security personnel at the time in the on campus, but just security guards just manning around the campus. And it's probably, I don't know. I think probably 5 or 6 of them I would see every day when I was going through that searches. But obviously later they changed it. But it has never had any military personnel inside from the US or
Mm.
any foreign country.
If I read correctly, it was 16 students that lost their life in that attack.
That's correct. I think it was 16 students together with the staff and the guard, and probably, if I recall correctly, it was 22 people injured overall that lost their lives that day. And I think the number of people who got injured that night was also something close to 200. That's what I heard, and I know out of that number, a few were seriously injured, including myself and some of my friends, who thankfully everyone is doing okay for now.
So, was the motive behind the attack simply because of the association with America and the potential ideals they were teaching their students?
I think it's so difficult because at that time in Afghanistan, there were very similar explosions and attacks happening almost every day or every other day across the country. And especially Kabul was witnessing a very similar attack on different, because also the American university was located in a very different part of the city. It was surrounded by, there was security compounds across that place. There was a military compound. There was the US military. There was the Afghan military. So it's very difficult to say what the motive behind that attack was, but definitely had the American name on it. So it could raise the profile of the university. People would think outside that maybe it is not what they say, maybe it's not a private university. So that's probably why we got attacked.
Mm. How long did it take for you to recover from the injuries and then return to education after that?
It is almost 9 years now that I'm still recovering. Certain the injuries, the extent of injury I sustained, are requires long treatment, unfortunately. But the first couple of months were very serious ones, and I was unable to walk. But I did manage to return back to university a little over a year after the incident, and I started taking a few classes, a few courses. Like I think I initially started with one class, and then two, and then three, and then four. So gradually took 5 courses, which was a triumphant moment for me because it took me a couple of years to be able to get back to getting 5 courses on a semester, which I did. But on my case, it was a slow recovery. It still has been a slow recovery, but it doesn't stop me. I'm lucky that I have received medical attention, and I've got the support from my family and friends and medical professionals in so many countries. Yeah, that has kept me going.
That's great to hear. So it's 2021. You made the jump from Afghanistan to the UK. How did you do that?
It was very, very sudden for so many of us, so many of my friends, people I knew. When Kabul fell, majority of us were instantly displaced because some of us left the country to third country. Some of us got into those planes to get out. And in my case, I went to Pakistan, and then from Pakistan, I came to the UK a couple of months later. Uh, yeah, I think it had challenges. That journey itself, it was just a moment of life that was very scary because I didn't know what the future will hold, where I will end up, what will happen to my country, what will happen to people I know, where, but long term, will I stay in Pakistan? Will I be in the US? Will I be anywhere in the world, or will I just go back to Afghanistan?
Mm.
And I ended up in the UK a couple of months later. Yeah, that's how the journey started and ended here.
How have you found that transition? Afghanistan, you were born and raised there. You'd never been to the UK before. So you moved kind of, I'm guessing, early, mid-20s. How's that transition going from Afghanistan, the culture, the religion, to London?
I think the transition generally has been really good for me from a resettlement point of view because I managed to get a job as soon as I was in the UK. I started to build a support network. I started meeting with people, networking with individuals. I went uh, to to engage with the community, and I think my education and language skills helped me get into the job market very, very quickly. And then I was very lucky. I was started working for a very good company who gave me enormous amount of support uh, to get into to get used to how things work in the UK in terms of the job market. A lot of advice, a lot of support,
Mm.
uh, and from there onwards, I started finding my way, and I met with other companies. I started like I've been in the job. I think that's the biggest part of being resettled, so that you always stay connected to people and you learn. Culturally, obviously, we have a cultural difference in Afghanistan and between Afghanistan and the UK, but you learn things, and I think I was very flexible. I landed quite quickly, but I still there are elements that I still don't know, and we're trying to get used to it.
Mm.
And from the religious point of view, obviously Afghanistan is uh, uh, and Afghanistan and the UK, there's a huge difference, but we do have that freedom to practice our religion. I always do. I always go to the mosque if I have time to, and yeah, there's no restriction on that, so no problem at all on the religion side.
What about the community piece? We're speaking at the start of this interview about how there's a massive sense of community in Afghanistan. People say that for West America, the UK are really individualistic in the way our community, society is set up. What's your first-hand experience of that, having grown up in Afghanistan and moved here?
I think the first couple of months for me, even when I had a job and I was still connected to a few people I knew, some communities, some community members, I think that there's a feeling of isolation wherever you go. Even if you travel to a country that you feel isolated for the first couple of months. That was the exact feeling for me, despite knowing some people, because I mentioned about the pace of life in here is completely different. Everybody get on with their jobs, and it's not easy to meet somebody if you wish to, because everyone is living far away from one another. It's going to take hours for everyone to come and see each other, which is not very, very convenient as compared to Kabul. It's a small city, anyone can see each other, or the families live close by. So that is something very challenging, I think I experienced. But the communities do come together. And the more I lived in London, the more I realized that communities all across different boroughs, especially if Afghans live in west of London, northwest of London, you always see that there are events happening, there are meetings, there are gatherings. And obviously, in my case, all my friends who were evacuated to the UK or they came part of studying as well, we managed to find each other. We created WhatsApp groups, and so that connection still exists. And we started building all of those.
Mm. Okay, so then in terms of what you're up to now, so you talk very highly of your job, and you also mentioned off cameras that you have built your own business. So you're landing on your 2 feet quite well here, just in a couple of years. What's the little business that you started?
Apart from all the job that I do, I on my first job I was working and I met somebody on that office who was very, very kind, and she told me, "Do you ever want to start? If you have an idea that you want to start a business or anything, we could help you introduce you to to an organization that's training refugee entrepreneurs." And I got a referral to that organization, and I had an idea already built because when I came, I went to theater to see a play with my friend, and I saw people wearing hats, and because we didn't wear hats in Afghanistan, I was like, maybe it's a good idea to dig into it. And I just started doing a lot of research after my job, and I ended up getting this idea to this refugee entrepreneur network, where they helped me build this idea into a business plan, and we launched a company called Hatopia that sells hats, and it started working for us. So last year we had suddenly we had a lot of sales. And initially the target was in the UK, but we sold in 33 countries. So that was very successful phase of business, and we won Startup Award from UB last year. And yeah, that's something we have been doing, something we enjoy doing. So I do have my job, and then that small business that helps us keep going and hopefully growing it.
It's so funny because immigrants are disproportionately much more entrepreneurial than the average person in the UK. 33% of startups in the UK are founded by immigrant founders.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's definitely something to do about resilience and the ability to move abroad and deal with uncertainty. You move to a brand new country, you didn't have any connections here, you've never been here before. So I think there's a certain risk tolerance that's baked into immigrants, people who move abroad. And of course, that is massively helpful when it comes to starting a business. So yeah, in terms of your day-to-day job, you also support Afghanis resettle in the UK. How have you found that?
That's the most rewarding part of what I do ever in my life. I've had a very diverse career in my life, but this is something very, very different to me because I got a chance to work for USB UK, and the project was to help Afghans. At the time when we started doing this, when I was hired to work for this organization, was to help Afghans who were stuck at different hotels. And obviously, was very much on the news headlines. So we went there to help with accommodation, but then we found out there was a huge number of Afghans who were evacuated. There was lack of information among them and awareness about life in general, about resettlement. We have designed a project that has been supporting Afghans with providing information in multiple languages, and we've made it very easy, very accessible. Information is available in Dari and Pashto in English. We do a lot of referral. We connect them with the rest of the community, with the job market. We are trying to help them to have a successful life here in the UK. That's why I like it, because we have been able to help so many people with just signposting a direction, and they knew exactly what to do. A lot of them, as you very rightly mentioned, that they are entrepreneurial. as to whether starting a business or just finding their own way of doing things that they have been doing in the past. So most of the people who I've worked with in different capacities are already involved doing things which are contributing actively to the UK, and that's why it's very rewarding for me. A, because I'm helping um, Afghans, and B, because I'm helping people who would otherwise been stuck just for not having access to the right information.
I know last summer things flared up here in the UK. There was a stabbing of 3 young little girls here in the UK, and that led to massive riots across the country against refugees and immigrants. It was all in the news, and it made global news. How did you feel seeing British people targeting immigrant hotels and trying to set fire to them?
I was closely following that news at the time. It was very, very depressing couple of hours watching the news, and it was also very, very shocking. But I wouldn't call it. I wouldn't. Because I have never, since I came to the UK, I haven't experienced any sort of racism or discrimination or anything negative that's all over. Maybe on X, for example, if you go there and scroll down, you see the level of hate which exists there. It doesn't exist in real life. Because I have traveled across the country, I have never experienced anything of that level. And I think with the riots last year that took place, it's very unfortunate to see incidents like that happen. What's unfortunate is that certain people who have come to the UK are committing those crimes. It doesn't. I think all of us are against that, because all of us want to be living.
It tarnishes your reputation when people abroad come here and commit crimes.
I think all of us have that one general feeling that we want to live in a safe environment. But when those incidents happen, it shouldn't be the cause for certain individuals to go and attack anyone with that background. It's wrong. But the riot last year was, as I said, depressing. But I think what was so cheerful to me was that the people, the general public in the country, took a stand the next day against that level of hate and racism, because I think hate never solves a problem, and riots and violence doesn't ever solve a problem. So last year was unfortunate, but we have seen that's the value of this country to me, that people stood up the next day to racism, and I think that's something all of us were feeling very, very different and happy about it.
Yeah, British people are very tolerant.
Yeah.
We're very accepting. We're regardless of our history, we are a very charitable country, and we're very, on the whole, broadly speaking, very welcoming towards kind of refugees and immigrants in general. It's unfortunate that there are crimes committed by refugees which tarnish the vast majority who are here, paying their taxes, creating entrepreneurial businesses like yourself, and trying to blaze their own path in their life.
Yeah.
So
I think it's almost impossible in any society to have people do commit crimes anywhere in the world, wherever you go, and it's so difficult to have a full control. And I wish that anyone coming to the UK with a refugee background, migrants, never go that route, never do anything which would otherwise generate a label to anyone who with that background. I think at the moment what we have seen with certain politicians, they label anyone as migrants or refugees as those who are committing crimes. So sometimes if you travel, you have that feeling that, okay, maybe because they see us all of us as others and as outsiders, or the sort of words and languages they use is extremely bad. But it's impossible to have a society without crime. People do commit crime, but we don't need to blame everyone for what an individual is doing.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of high-profile individuals here in the UK who drive that agenda, is obviously Nigel Farage. Have you heard of Tommy Robinson?
I've heard of Tommy Robinson. I've heard of Nigel Farage. I've heard of all of them, and I'm seeing the tweets and the posts they're making about general migrants and about as I call it, is very
What's your view on Tommy Robinson? Do you see any valid points which he shares, or is it all 100% pure hatred from him, from your perspective?
I think the way the language and the tone they use is 100% wrong, because they want to, obviously it's a free society, anyone can comment on things, and if something goes wrong, everyone has the right to criticize that and talk about it. But the way they do is they generalize for an individual. They always blame the whole group of people for an individual crime that's been committed by an individual. That's wrong. That's why they're creating a very, very unsafe environment for everyone. I think we have seen that example last year. We are seeing that example in the last couple of days as well. That's right now happening. So that's wrong. I don't agree with that. I think it's not the right way to resolve things. And most of the time, the sort of online activism we see from specific individuals and groups like them, they come with fake profiles, fake names on X, and that's why they write what they want to write. The level of hate always comes from people with no name, no profile picture. They're not real.
Yeah.
That's why their supporters are always like that. I haven't seen. I mean, if somebody comes with the right, I mean, I don't say that no one should criticize of that if a problem like that exists, but it shouldn't lead to more hate.
Yeah, I mean, social media is full of trolls and fake bots. Look, I know very little about Islam as a religion and the different facets of it. There's a narrative online that's not just online, but kind of historians and academics and whatever, that the Quran incites violence depending on the interpretation of how people perceive it.
Mm-hmm.
What's your interpretation, and are the hesitations and the concerns that people share about the Quran and Islam as a broad religion valid?
No, it's not valid because I grew up in Afghanistan. I've studied the Holy Quran. I'm not a deeply religious person. I'm not a scholar to know every bit of the religion, but as a very, very normal, faithful Muslim, I know that it does not promote violence, and it never encourages anyone to have violence. Because if that's the if because I think what they say is completely wrong. I've never seen individuals who post or share about this specific issue to debate with the Islamic scholar or somebody who has that religious background. It's always been one-sided argument from them. So I've never seen that, because the only time they can prove is if they sit with the Islamic religious scholar and debate around this issue, so that they prove that it's not right. I think they just find a specific line somewhere which is not real, and they just keep posting it all the time. Also, they are never specific on what they say about this issue. So to me, it's not a valid point. I think what they say is wrong. I don't think any religion encourages its followers to commit violence.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Christianity has had its struggles. You just look at Northern Ireland, and the issues in recent history there. In my perspective, every single society and country has bad actors, whether it's 0.5% of a population or whatever it might be. And my personal view on this, particularly around Islam, is that bad actors will use religion as a vehicle to justify means to an end. Mm-hmm. So when people are talking about violence and terrorist attacks, I wonder how much of it is religion driven versus just inherently bad actors who don't have a good set of values and morals, and that can be manipulated regardless of what the religion is.
Nobody owns the religion, and they cannot take the religion as a hostage for their ideology. If somebody's committing certain crimes, or if somebody's committing certain acts, or if they're following a specific ideology for their own purposes, is completely different than blaming it on the religion, or blaming it on the millions of people or billions of people who are following a specific religion. Because if I haven't seen anyone, there are millions of people, Muslims living in this country. Not all of them are committing violence. Not all of them are doing anything which, specific people could could blame them. There are people, there are ordinary, normal people who likes to have a very normal, day-to-day life. And a lot of, and I'm talking about billions of Muslims across the country, across the globe as well. So if that's something, if the religion promotes violence, then all the billions of people would be violent as well. Nobody else. That's the reality.
Mm. Yeah, there's a common theme in this whole conversation is a small minority committing horrific crimes, which in turn leads to a broad generalization of the rest of that society. Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, sadly.
Anil, I want to end this on a high. What is your hopes for the future of Afghanistan?
I hope and I pray that Afghanistan finally sees a better future. I think it has seen enough. Afghanistan is exhausted as a country. The people are exhausted. Families are exhausted. Families have seen enough of violence and have suffered enough. I think it's time for Afghanistan to finally be left on its own, be helped in a way that it doesn't create more problems within that country. I think Afghanistan now deserves a chance for better days, and I'm happy that at least the war on that scale that we all used to see is over, and people can hopefully. I hope that people can have a just a normal day, like normal life, just like the rest of us are having outside of that region. And I hope Afghanistan will find its way to light, and for people to have access to education, for people to have access to jobs, international markets, the business and trading routes and everything to open up for Afghanistan. Or at the moment, unfortunately, Afghanistan is isolated completely, as we all know, and it's not very political. I think it's about millions of people who are living there, and I think they deserve a chance.
You were critically injured by the Taliban. Could you ever forgive them?
I have, yeah, I've already forgiven them. The fact is, we don't know who attacked the university. It was never claimed by the Taliban or any other group. So, in my case, whoever did it, I have forgiven them, and I am a peace-loving individual, and I hope that I think the path forward is forgiving each other and moving on.
Anil, thank you for your time.
Thank you.